Hello and welcome to another edition of Another Book Review. This week I'll be reviewing Nancy Kress's Crossfire. I'll talk very briefly about the author, go into a spoiler-free overview of the plot, talk about what I liked about the book, what I didn't like about the book, who I'd recommend the book to, and finish off with what I'll be reading for next time. Nancy Kress is an American science fiction writer. She's been writing for probably about 3 or 4 decades at this point. Her big break came in the early 90s when she published and won a Hugo Award and a Nebula Award for her short, I think it's a novella-length work called Beggars in Spain. I still think that's probably what she's best known for. She's still actively writing. She co-authored a book 2 or 3 years ago that got some buzz. But this is the first of her stuff that I've read. Crossfire, this book is the first book in a series of 2 books called Green Trees, which is the name of the planet that these characters arrive on. So the book Crossfire is about a group of mostly scientists, but also political refugees, some religious dissidents who have decided to. The book is set in the future, and this is the first kind of private expedition away from Earth. And the book, this is the story of the book, that there's 3 or 4 other planets that various governments have discovered beyond Earth. They have not found any intelligent life forms outside of human beings, and this is the first time that human beings have encountered intelligent life. Is this planet that they arrive on called Green Trees, which is something like, I think it's roughly 70 years in the history of the book that this group of characters are in stasis. And the book mostly follows about 10 characters or so who make up some of them are high-ranking members of this corporation that have decided to go on this journey, and they, as a corporation, have funded this expedition to this planet with the idea that everybody going is not going to come back to Earth. And so there's a couple people who are kind of high-ranking members of this corporation who have decided to do this, and there are various factions who have also decided to go on this journey. So you have some extended family members of one of the corporate heads, and then you have a religion called the New Quakers, which are essentially Quakers, and you have a group of Chinese delegates. You have a group of Cheyenne who are trying to reclaim land by basically going back to we would call pre-colonization ways once they get to this planet. And then you have a large sect of, I'm not sure what country they're. I believe they're either Iranian or Saudi Arabian. You have a sect of these people who have come to the planet as well. I don't think we go over kind of the reasons for them going in detail, but you have these various groups of people. You have about 6,000 kind of people who are forming this colony, and the bulk of the book is really about the interaction with the alien creatures that they find and what to do about that. Once they realize that there are these alien creatures who are involved in a war, and I don't think it's a spoiler to say that because I think it tells us in the flap of the book. Yeah, so not a spoiler. It's in the flap of the book, so I feel comfortable saying that. The human beings interact with these group of aliens called furs, and they soon learn that the furs are in a war with creatures called vines, and it's really about how the various characters work amongst themselves in order to kind of navigate this war between the vines and the furs. So I liked the fact that Nancy Kress, I think, has a really good ear for character, and I think that the humans think of this idea in the far-flung future that everybody is going to have worked out their issues in terms of like interpersonal issues, but it's like any workplace where you've worked with someone for a certain amount of time, and small things that they do kind of get on your nerves over time. That is kind of an effect in this book, which I really enjoyed. And I think more interestingly, I really enjoyed the world and the idea of these characters coming to this new place and still having kind of this factionalism. I thought that was pretty interesting. But ultimately, like the thing is with the characters, I think she handles character motivations pretty well. But ultimately, like the most interesting parts of the book are kind of philosophical issues that she raises. You know, do you have an obligation to the truth over human beings? How do people psychologically bond with other people, and how do they sometimes, once those bonds have been formed, are they able to pivot and kind of take in new information even though that the bonding has taken place? And so there are a lot of really, I thought, interesting kind of quandaries that the characters are put in that I thought was kind of the best part of the novel. Um, Unlike the last book that I read, 3 Miles Down or 3 Miles Deep, the Harry Turtledove novel, this book moves at a really good clip, especially the beginning. So you basically meet the aliens on page 50. So she writes a relatively lean novel. It gets a little bit, the sections kind of extend as you move through the book, but the first 50 pages, you're basically there, and she sets these things up pretty economically. She's a very economic writer. I listened to part of her lecture that she did at the Odyssey Workshop, which is a workshop for science fiction writers a few years ago that was recorded and released as a podcast. And she kind of talks about how her writing improved once she figured out the concept of scenes and having different scenes moving the story forward, excuse me. And you see that in this book. I think she does a really good job of that. I could get the sense that kind of in moving towards some things that I thought maybe could have been done better. There's a couple of things that could have been set up in the beginning of the novel a little bit more cleanly. There is something of a plot twist about halfway through the novel that I think could have been set up relatively easily, but because she doesn't set it up earlier in the book, it kind of feels like it comes out of left field a little bit, and I think that could have been handled relatively easily, and to not have felt like kind of being the wool kind of, or the rug being pulled out from underneath the reader. There's a couple of relationships in the book. One of them I think seems natural, and one of them does not seem natural given the characters and their psychology and how they relate to one another. The one that feels natural, the termination of that relationship kind of came pretty abruptly for me, and I wish that there had been a little bit more there. I got the sense that she is kind of a pantser in terms of writing and discovery writing, and I felt that some of these things weren't as planned out as maybe I would have liked. There's a sequel to this book, and I think she kind of wants to split the characters up and have them go on different adventures, and I think that may have been one of the reasons for doing that. But it still felt pretty abrupt for what came before it. I like that these scientific characters have kind of their own expertise, and then I thought that they did a relatively realistic way of how interaction with the first aliens would happen, given the the confines of the story. So I thought that was cool. I like the idea of having kind of the scientific method almost, and that these different parties kind of coming together to try to answer these questions while they're all kind of acknowledging that they're making these crazy assumptions about things. I thought that really worked well. I thought that the idea of the intergalactic war between these two species I thought was interesting. I wish there had been a little bit more maybe background on the history of that maybe will come in the second book. But otherwise, I found myself really enjoying it. I was a little surprised of how low it was and how I had not heard of it. I thought it did a really good job of what it was trying to do. I think also just the idea of having this planet that you have, like, I think at one point she says there's like 6,000 colonists who are on this planet. So she has this ability to kind of pull in characters kind of whenever she needs to, which is pretty cool. I liked the interactions with the characters that we had. There's a relationship between a father and a daughter in the book that I think kind of drives the book forward for a lot of it. In the father character, his religious beliefs kind of continuously kind of come to the fore, and so those oftentimes push against the other characters. And I thought those interactions were really interesting, and the quandaries that kind of are raised by his religious beliefs I thought were really interesting. So if you've read The Sparrow, that's probably the book that I'm sitting here going, what is this book like? It's, to me, much less grim than The Sparrow. The Sparrow at the end especially gets a little really pretty grim and dark. I thought that this book is a lot less grim and dark. There's violence in the book that those things happen, but it didn't feel as awful as that book felt. And I also think I have not read any sequels to The Sparrow, so I don't know if what that series goes beyond. I also felt that this held up going through the book. The quality of the book held pretty well throughout the book. I think like at the end there's some parts and quibbles that I had with it, but overall I thought it was a very entertaining read and pretty quick read. So if you're interested in first contact stories, if you've enjoyed something like The Sparrow but want something that maybe a little bit lighter, if you kind of like this idea of how religions would work when interacting with intelligent beings, I think this book does a good job of handling that. I think that the interactions of the characters and the different duties to the characters and how they kind of handle the shifting duties I thought was also really interesting, the duties and obligations. So I think that there's a lot there. I think that the book it's 20 years old. It felt very fresh in reading it. Didn't feel very dated to me. There's, like I said, the quibbles in the beginning of setting up certain things, but overall I found myself really enjoying it. Because of that, I think I'm going to read the sequel for next time, which is, I believe, called Crucible, which I have that on a PDF, so I'll be reading that. If you've enjoyed this, please feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you've read Crossfire, please feel free to leave a comment below. Did you like it? Did you not like it? What were some things that you enjoyed about it? I saw pretty mixed reviews on Goodreads. I could see some of those. I didn't read the reasons for it, but I saw that some people, just their first line was, I was mixed on this thing. I tried to stop reading at that point. But I'm going to go back and check some of those reviews out to see whether or not I agree with them. But I thought that for what the author was trying to accomplish, I thought there was not enough fun moments in the book to justify it. I thought there was like an intellectual curiosity about what this would look like that was kind of also throughout the book that I enjoyed. It's not really nothing is like nothing in the book I think is simple, which I enjoyed. There's kind of complications of the relationships between the characters and the alien war that we have. The war is not the typical war that you would think of when you think of the word war, and I thought her twisting of that raised ethical questions that I think were also really interesting, and so you have a clash there. So I was surprised I have not heard about this book more. I did enjoy it. If you are looking for something maybe a little bit different than your like typical intergalactic war between species and human beings kind of caught between it, and you haven't checked it out, Crossfire, Nancy Kress would recommend it. So until next time, bye.